The supply of talent is so much more than the capital available. And once we start actually balancing the talent with the capital, I think it will really change like the whole face of the region.
That was the voice of Ramez El-Serafy, co-founder and GP at F6 Ventures. I am your host, Ali Zwail, and this is the Startups Arabia podcast, where you learn about the Arab startups ecosystem from the best founders, investors, and operators in the region. My guest today is Ramez El-Serafy. Ramez is the general partner and co-founder of F6 Ventures. He has 18 years of experience in technology, investments, entrepreneurship, and management. Before launching F6 Ventures, Ramez served as CEO of Flat6Labs, the accelerator, from 2011 to 2025, where he led its transformation into one of the most active innovation platforms in the Middle East and Africa, expanding its footprint, scaling its operation, and investing in hundreds of high-growth startups. Earlier in his career, Ramez was responsible for building and managing the mobile applications business at Sarmady, a Vodafone company. He also served as a board member of the Global Accelerator Network from 2014 to 2016. He holds a B.Sc in computer engineering from Alexandria University and is deeply committed to fostering innovation, empowering entrepreneurs, and building impactful businesses that shape the future of emerging markets. Enjoy this deep dive into F6 and Flat6Labs with Ramez El-Serafy. Welcome to the Startups Arabia podcast. My guest today is Ramez El-Serafy. Ramez is the co-founder and general partner of F6 Ventures. And previously, for the past 14 years, he was also the head of Flat6Labs. And Flat6Labs has had a huge impact on the Arab startups ecosystem. They've invested in over 300 startups in this period across many countries in the region. Some of them are names you will all recognize. So I'm very excited to hear from Ramez today. Welcome, Ramez.
Thank you so much, Ali, for having me. Very excited to be joining you today and speaking to your amazing audience about Flat6Labs and F6 Ventures and everything we have done.
Cool. Looking forward to it. So, Ramez, maybe we should start the conversation with your move into the venture ecosystem. You graduated from a technical kind of computer engineering undergraduate education, and you took some leadership roles quite quickly, and then you made a move into the startup ecosystem as the head of Flat6Labs, the startup accelerator, beginning in Egypt. So, tell me about how that happened. How did that change occur?
It's a very interesting story that happened a very long time ago now, I guess longer than 14 years ago. As you said, I studied computer engineering. However, I did actually start working when I was like maybe in the second year of university. So I've started my career very early on. I worked in like design, like web design and product design in general. And then right after graduation, I started like maybe not looking at the software development career specifically, although I did study computer engineering. I started mainly focusing on design in general, product design. It was a topic that was very intriguing to me. I've always had this kind of, creative touch in general, and I felt like, product design or web design and UI design in general, it does combine like the engineering elements plus, of course, the visual elements. So it was something that was very intriguing to me. So I did join a company called Sarmady, which is one of the very early startups, if you call it a startup, that started in Egypt 20 years ago and got acquired by Vodafone in 2008. It's an internet holding group that operates several websites, of course, websites like Philgoal and Contact Cars and others back then. And they had also other websites that maybe are not operational today, but were very famous back then as well. And I learned a lot from this experience. I worked with the design team, honed my like web skills, if you'd say, in terms of like how to speak to the web audience, how to build a product. I was very surprised because like, in Egypt, we're talking about like here 2006, 2007. So it was pre-mobile apps, mobile platforms, web 2.0 was just taking off, I guess. And it was a team that actually applied a lot of like really new trends very early on for the masses. Like, like back then there were only like two or three companies that were operating. Like we still were most of people were still on like dialing. It was still like DSL was still taking off, and they like how to serve the Egyptian user or like the Egyptian audience in general online is something that they had to build the fundamentals for. So I really learned a lot about like how to like everything, not just from the design perspective, because like we had to work with marketing, with like content, of course, software development or like the tech side of it as well. It was like just a web, so there were no like other platforms, and but actually we managed to learn a lot and build really good, robust products and platforms for the masses. Like literally, back then, although it was just like starting in Egypt, it was like millions of people checking the scores on fullgoal.com and all of that, and learning how to like serve these like huge audiences from early on was a huge experience for me. And then like I started shifting more into product design. I joined another company called the eSpace, focused on building a product design team from scratch. Then I moved back to Sarmady, but back then they got acquired by Vodafone, so they had the mandate to start shifting all their web products to be mobile friendly or building the mobile app aspect. So like iPhone, like I think like there was just like people who you can count, like just like really like not that many who had like iPhones. Everyone was BlackBerry. So shifting to like very rich mobile apps, and like what's the requirement to build this kind of like experience for users in general in Arabic as well, because like most of the content was in Arabic. So we had to like learn a lot of this. I think like I spent like 6 months just doing research on all like the mobile platforms and systems and the apps and all of this. Of course, iPhone was a novelty, so like just it wasn't really the top platform we think of as iOS. I don't think iOS was even like a word back then. It was just the iPhone OS. And we started actually learning all of that and adapting it to the Arabic or the Egyptian user experience. So again, it was like a kind of a new learning experience for me, shifting to this kind of new platform and technology, and learned a lot again. Worked with a kind of like a different team within the company back then. In 2011, something very interesting happened. So of course, there was like the Arab Spring at the same time, like people, happening in the background, and like the political change in Egypt and the region, but also the two gentlemen, like my partners, Ahmed Al-Alfi and Hani Sumbati, they had started Sawari Ventures, and they back then they've noticed that deploying large sums of capital is something that definitely the market needs when it comes to like tech startups. However, there isn't like one single platform that focuses on early stage or seeded stage investments. Many of these young entrepreneurs, like, and maybe many of them are like trying to voice their opinions in the streets and all of that, but also they're also trying to their own opinions when it comes to business, when it comes to building their own ventures, having their own ideas, and changing the narrative somehow. And like there wasn't really that kind of many platforms or organizations that were offering that kind of support for very early stage entrepreneurs in Egypt, or the wannabe entrepreneurs, like the pre-entrepreneur kind of stage. And this is how Flat6Labs was born. It was born out of an opportunity in the market where they saw so many bright minds and founders who have great ideas, but they don't have the means or the connections or the tools to take it forward and launch it in the market. So Flat6Labs was designed as an accelerator to take like a cycle of development for these founders, put them through this environment, give them all the connections, the training, the mentoring, the hands-on support, help them launch their product, and then help them also with funding and help them fundraise and connect to investors. So that was the initial idea and concept of Flat6Labs. And I think they were looking for someone who can manage this kind of like project, if you'd say, still very novel or very new in Egypt. And it happened, and you asked about how I shifted to this. It happened because I tweeted something, and my ex-boss, Con O'Donnell, I don't know if you know him, he's someone who's very and mentoring, investing across the ecosystem in Egypt, who is also happens to be the founder of Sarmady. He retweeted my tweet, and then Hani, my partner, he saw that tweet. He didn't like the tweet. He was just actually more, I would say, annoyed because of what I wrote. I don't remember like what I really wrote back then. Then he went and checked my profile, and for a minute, I had in my bio like my interests, which was like basically tech, mobile apps, product design, marketing, all of that, and these were all the things he was looking for, So basically, he called Con and asked about like, do you know this guy? Like, you just retweeted, and he said, yeah, Ramez, he works with me in the company. He does 1, 2, 3, all of that. He said, do you mind if I approach him because like we're launching this new thing? Then Con, he's such a great mentor and personal mentor, of course, friend. He said, yeah, of course. Like, I don't mind. I think this would be great for him. I think he's also important for Sarmady, but I think this will also be really good for the ecosystem at large, what you guys are building, and I think he would be a great fit. So Hani called me, and I met with him. I remember in April 2011, and we started like actually like brainstorming this concept that they had in mind for Flat6Labs and how it could launch and when and in what format, like the format for the cycle. So we've done so much research. There were like some, of course, examples in like the global ecosystem, if you'd say. So like Techstars had launched like a couple of years prior. Of course, YC was already pretty much established in the market. So they had Dropbox, Airbnb, like all these names were actually went through YC and became huge while we were launching Flat6Labs. So the model was there, right, in Silicon Valley. But like, how can you take this model and apply it in the market here? There was only one similar platform or organization in the region, which is Oasis 500 out of Jordan, that was an accelerator that launched before Flat6Labs actually in 2010. But they had a very different model and was focused only on the Jordanian ecosystem, of course. And we started like researching all of these examples, and we did focus groups and met with so many founders, attended so many conferences. There were like a lot of startup weekends, if you remember, back then in Egypt, and talked to all these founders about like what if there was a platform or environment where you would walk in and we give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and help you build your product, access the market, the connections, everything. Everyone said this is like music to our ears. We would love if you guys have built this. Then we started, okay, how much money you would need, like in terms of capital, how much equity you would give in return for this capital and support. And this how we designed the first offering of Flat6Labs. And we started in October, exactly 14 years ago, in October 2011, our first cohort. We called it Cycle Zero. It was by invitation only, the application. So we kind of handpicked the founders who would join. All the startups who joined the cycle, they don't exist anymore. All of them are dead. However, many of them, they have gone and done amazing things after that. So, for example, one of them is Mustafa Naguib of Ekshif, or I don't know if you know Mustafa. Now he's based in Germany. He co-founded 3 startups after Ekshif, I think, and now he has an amazing success story out of Berlin. So that's like one of the founders or the entrepreneurs we had in the Cycle Zero of Flat6Labs, for example. And the thing about Flat6Labs that I think was so special from day one, because like there were other platforms in Egypt or organizations, government and non-government, that were trying to tackle like the entrepreneurial question of like how can we support young Egyptian youth to build their companies, start contributing to the economy, and help them build startups and scale the startups. However, none of them provided the capital. Most of them provided training, like events, like all the startup weekends, bringing people together, but like the financial aspect was always missing. And since Hani and Alfie, they're kind of like, the godfathers of like venture capital in Egypt, they come from a private equity background. They established one of the very first VCs in Egypt, Saudi Ventures. So that was really essential when it comes to how you work with entrepreneurs. So combining capital and the cash component of it with the hands-on support was quite key in terms of how the Flat6Labs model was designed, how it remains to be so as well, and how can we scale that, right? So we started this in October 2011, as I told you, and then we started working with the companies, but providing them with the capital as well. And we one cohort after the next, like 2 cycles later, we had like one great success story, like Instabug, for example. Then we had Simplex, had Tagaddud. All of them are like still in the market, raised a ton amount of money and doing great things. And that was the first phase of the Flat6Labs existence between 2011 up to maybe 2015, 2016. It was like we call it phase one.
No, I was just saying that I love that story and that, there's this serendipity in how it all started, and it also captures the excitement in the country, like in 2011. Everything was moving and changing and growing and progressing. People were very optimistic. So it captures that mood.
100%. Again, like we had one rule at Flat6Labs, back then, and still pretty much applied, which is you can talk anything in Flat6Labs, but don't talk politics, don't talk religion. And we tried to make it like we had people coming from all walks of life, like literally all like different religious groups, all different backgrounds, all different classes in Egypt, or different cities, and yeah, and we tried to make it as inclusive as possible. And I think that was also very important aspect in terms of how can you bring everyone and give them a fair opportunity, and not prefer someone because like they might look like that they are from a certain background, or from like a connection or whatever. I think the first cohort, like just giving you an example, we literally didn't know most of the people in that cohort. So they came and through a recommendation from someone, like that they are building something and let's connect with them. And then after that, every single person who went to Flat6Labs was given a very fair opportunity, from the application interview or the application review actually getting there, again regardless of what's going on in the streets. And like because like there was a whole political thing happening in the background in Egypt between 2011 up to 2014, 15 maybe. And we kept going, and like we had no interruptions. Like again, so many things in Egypt got interrupted between 2011 and 2014. Flat6Labs never had an interruption. I remember that. We one time only in 2013 we had to postpone a demo day for a couple of weeks because of the events, but like other than that, yeah, I kept going. And because like we always say that, because like with the question we used to get from the press and from everyone, like, "Hey, guys, like, are you crazy? You're doing this, like, we know like the whole country is going through this whole transformation." It's like, like, of course, like, because like young people will never cease to exist in Egypt, and the brightest of them are very passionate to do something now. They're very excited. Many of them are returning from, they studied abroad and they came back, and like they are trying to build a new future for the country. And we just wanted to really capture all of this. And we I think we had the right bet, right? So many of the success stories, like for example, Enes Tabag, these two guys who just graduated from Cairo University, literally the day after the graduation, they started with Flat6Labs building their startup. So they didn't have much of a corporate experience or work experience. I think Omar Gabra, the co-founder of Instabag, he think or Mu'taz, they had like an internship in Seattle with Microsoft. So they had this kind of experience, and they identified the problem they were trying to solve, and then they took this and brought it to us as an idea or a concept, an early concept, of course, for Instabag that went through a lot of different iterations. But yeah, just to give you an example about like what kind of founders we worked with back then, for sure.
Yep, yep. So, I mean, we're probably going to go into a few of these examples, but you mentioned you had just moved into the startup ecosystem, but you had two great mentors, Ahmed and Hani. So, what are the most important lessons that stick in your mind from what they taught you at the very beginning of Flat6Labs?
That's a very good question, because like again, it's a really long journey, so I don't know if there's one specific thing that I can, like, over 14 years you get to like learn and absorb a lot of things from both, and they're both are very different. Like I don't know if people have, Ahmed, they're great partners of course together, but they're very different personalities in general. I think like one of like I think because like of the nature of how we operate at Flat6Labs, I personally did to get work much more with Hani on a daily basis as well. He's our chairman at Flat6Labs, and now at X6 Group. But like I think that the thing that we learned, and I think just reflecting back on what we were just saying about like the political environment back then, like, and like what's going on around, that just keep going, just keep your eyes focused on the target, like keep pushing forward. I think this is like the thing that kept Flat6Labs growing and growing over the years. That there were so many like points where we could have like just maybe scaled down, or thought that no, it's too early for us to like go to Saudi or go to Abu Dhabi or expand in Tunis or do all of that. But like we keep growing. I think keeping growing, or like keep focusing on the target, I think is really really important. One of like the very early lessons I remember that I learned from Hani almost on a day one of the job, and it was actually part of the tagline of Flat6Labs, which is entrepreneurship through natural selection. That was the very first slogan or line we had at Flat6Labs. And because like I've been through like some startup experience on my own and with others, but like I think the thing that I really didn't grasp much was like at the end of the day, startups go through a natural selection process, right? Like the survival usually is for the strongest or the fittest. And the fittest doesn't mean like the richest, doesn't mean the smartest. It means someone who's actually tenacious enough to actually keep going, right? They keep focused and they keep being curious to build and grow rather than like just getting distracted along the way with many other things. And this is how the natural selection of the process works, right? And like that was literally one of the very first lessons that I learned from Hani, and we kind of put it in the Flat6Labs slogan that it has to happen through natural selection. This is how startups and how life works. But yeah, there's so many other lessons. I'm sure we'll be covering them over our conversation.
Interesting. I mean, when you said the fittest, I thought you would mean, product market fit. The one that fits best with their product with the market. But you're talking about the grittiest, the toughest, so to speak.
One of the, I guess when I was telling you about the first cycle, although like many of them, as I told you, are really great people and great founders who like one of them works at Apple now, the other one has like a very successful startup in Germany. The thing that I guess we kind of like maybe got distracted with at the beginning, or like not distracted, but like thought that actually that might be the right thing to do, which was focusing on concepts and ideas rather than the founders. And like getting stuck with the concept like, okay, what's the most innovative thing that these people are doing, like we have to invest in the most creative, innovative, the most unique. And then you realize that concepts change, business models change, like markets change as well. Someone can be operating in Egypt, the next day they can be like operating in a different market. So but the team doesn't really change much. Sometimes yeah, people come and go like as founders, but like if you believe in a couple of founders, that's it. Like with Omar and Mu'taz of Instabank, and I think it will be an example that we'll mention again. They came to us with a very different concept. I'm not sure if I'm at liberty about telling you what kind of concept it was, but it was very, very different industry, very different. It was more of like a social working app. So, and we told them, guys, like, how, like, it's almost impossible to, like, compete with something that's, like, almost overlapping with Facebook. Like, it just doesn't make sense, in Egypt back then. Like, and you guys come from this engineering and software engineering background, so maybe do something within this space. And then they came back with a concept, an early concept of what Instabug now is, and that's it. Because like we just bet on the team. They felt like these are two bright guys who actually could do something, but they have the wrong concept. And then like you mentor them and you try to tell them maybe you need to change the idea. And this is exactly how. And that was like starting the second or third cohort, I would say, of Flat6Labs, that we have to start focusing more and more on the founders, on the team, on their like synergies together, on their like chemistry as well, and how they work with each other, and how we work with them as Flat6Labs as well, and how we add the value.
Right. Yeah. So in that debate about what's more important, product or market or founders, you believe it's founders.
Like the others, the other factors are important as well. I wouldn't really like, for example, like if there's a concept that has been done over and over in the market and never took off, we would never like. It doesn't make sense for us to invest in, even if it's Elon Musk. Like still, like it wouldn't really work in this market. So like why? However,
I would make an exception for Elon
if
Musk,
Elon
but
Musk comes to Egypt, then like but
yeah,
like like but the founders again, because like you at very early stage, and like when you don't really have a product, when you have really early traction, it all comes down to the team, right? And if you speak to any pre-seed or seed investor, they always say the same thing. It's the product is important, but the team is the most important thing. Like without a good team, like the product is a product of the team. It's like it's the team that built this product. So if you don't have a team, then you don't have a product, you don't have a market, you don't have anything. You have attraction, everything. So I think definitely it all starts from the founders and the team.
cool. So you guys started in Egypt, and then after that, it's expanded significantly. You're in KSA, UAE, Tunis, Jordan, I think, in Lebanon, right? And so many people from all over the Arab world. You've invested in them, and you've helped them grow. How did that? I mean, that must have been incredibly challenging, first of all. But what was the biggest challenge that you had as you tried to scale the concept? And why did you make this choice?
Again, like I think you need to think of Flat6Labs itself and where we are today as a startup experience, because like we started from nothing and we are here today with a big group and a platform that employs like we have like
Yep, yep.
100 10 people now in our employment across the group. So, and presence in maybe like 10 different countries and expanding in different regions as well. So going back to like the first, like the lesson that I told you, like I learned from Alf and Henny, which was like keep growing. And I think it was more about like we had that, like the first idea was that we would expand the Flat6Labs model itself further in Egypt. So we started in Cairo, then we can go on to Alexandria, to Upper Egypt. And then I think we've realized very quickly that the founders actually find more opportunities in Cairo, right? Something that we really cannot change about the country, how centralized everything is in Cairo. And they find opportunity, investors are in Cairo, all of that. Of course, there are so many great efforts and initiatives in Alexandria, for example. Many of the founders, I'm from Alexandria, many of the founders, we invest from
Yeah, so am
Alexandria.
I.
Exactly. So, but like we both live in Cairo, we both like, we know that the opportunities are here and the investors are here, the corporates are here. So I think the concept of expanding plastic labs within Egypt didn't make a lot of commercial sense. However, we started looking at markets outside of Egypt and we found that there was like also opportunities. Saudi in 2013, which when we started actually expanding to there was nothing. It was like literally like we were the first privately managed accelerator to launch in the country in partnership with a local partner there. And today Saudi is the biggest ecosystem in the region in terms of the amount of funding and number of startups and all of that. So like 10 years later, I've gone so far, but like back then, it was a very promising ecosystem because it had all the right ingredients, but the glue of bringing it together wasn't really there, like the catalyst. And we felt that as Flat6Labs, we can play a role there. And we had a local partner, an amazing local partner, who wanted to build this concept out of Jeddah. And we just joined forces and decided to launch Flat6Labs Jeddah in 2013. And then we started actually seeing how can we expand. And I think that was my second challenge. So after between 2011 and 2013, it was more about building this concept in Cairo and running the cycles and producing startups like Instabug and TaskT and Simplex and many others. But the second challenge was how can we expand this model? So what does that mean? Like, because like we work and we kind of control everything we know about Egypt and running the environment in Cairo with Flat6Labs. How once you start going to Jeddah, that's a totally different market, totally different dynamics. You have a local partner as well. So, like, are you applying the same process? Do you need to adjust things in the process? That was the first time that most of our content and curriculum was in English. Saudi, back then, like by default, you needed to introduce everything in Arabic in terms of sessions and content and all that. So I had to translate a lot of things to Arabic. So we had to start actually looking at recruiting mentors in Saudi as well. How can we replicate the model there? What kind of people we need to hire? How can we document the process? So we spent, I think, like 6 months of just documenting every single aspect of the Flat6Labs process. How do you recruit a mentor? How you work with a mentor? How you evaluate a mentor? How can you communicate with a mentor? And the templates for everything. Same for the startups. How to design the application. Like all of that was documented in a very like kind of like really big playbook that we had to produce because like now you're not doing it yourself. Someone else is doing it on your behalf. So we have to kind of design this. And this is like was the first stage of how can we expand this model and scale it, right? And I think it was a great learning experience for us because like we get to do it in a different market with a great partner, learn from that market, but also get to expand and reapply the process in a different market. So like Flat6Labs Jeddah ran, I think, from 2013 up to 2017, and we had the challenges, but also worked with many great founders and mentors, and many of them are still very close friends. We had very good success stories coming out of Jeddah. And then the whole country in Saudi actually went through a transformation where Riyadh started taking also the spotlight, and many initiatives started emerging by the government under the Vision 2030 in Saudi. So the country definitely went through another transition. Like, we went through this transition in Egypt, but also Saudi went through its own transition, of course. And it was a great one, of course, to witness all of this. And then we re-entered the market in Riyadh a few years ago. So that was Saudi. And then after that was Abu Dhabi, where we worked with 254 to launch also the first accelerator in Abu Dhabi with them on digital media. And that was a nice third challenge because like in Egypt we worked with Egyptian founders, in Saudi we worked with Saudi founders, and Abu Dhabi it was an international accelerator. So we had startups coming from India, from Spain, Italy, Lebanon, Jordan, of course Egypt as well, and many countries. So like now you are catering for an international audience, like, and what's like the add value that an Egyptian operator can present to like this kind of international group of founders who would come to Abu Dhabi to establish their businesses and grow. So that was a nice third challenge to have. And like, again, like we built the platform and we invested in really good companies. One of them is called Washman, for example, which is the top application for on-demand laundry services in the country, in the UAE today, still operating and very, very successfully growing. And that was the first phase of Flat6Labs. That basically that concludes like the building the model in Egypt, scaling it to a couple of other countries, and and this is like how that mainly around the accelerator model. And all the other countries and expansions, they started happening under the second phase, which was turning the Flat6Labs model from just an accelerator to a fund manager that also runs accelerators. And this is when we started raising and putting together our venture capital funds. So we launched at the same time, almost simultaneously, we launched funds in Egypt, Tunisia, and Lebanon with a very similar mandate. We'll provide funding to the startups that are going through the accelerator. A much larger ticket than before, of course, because now we have the capacity to do that. Also to provide them with the follow-on funding, which was a very important missing aspect that we didn't have before. So because like a startup, you can invest in like say $30,000, $40,000. That was the ticket back then. Now it's much higher. But also like we lacked like what if a startup grows and they need more capital after like the program, or they actually raised another round and would like to participate in this round so we don't dilute ourselves. So that was a very important aspect of the model that we developed. We started learning, and this is also when Dina, my partner, started shifting to Flat6Labs. She was with Sawari Ventures back then. So Dina was really, I think, the main essential, like a role or factor to transition Flat6Labs into this second phase of making it more institutionalizing it as an investor, not as just an accelerator. With her investment background, so because I had this kind of technical and operational background to run the accelerator, all of that, but Dina definitely brought all like the know-how for the investment part with her investment experience. So we started working together on building these funds. So we have funds in Egypt, Tunisia, and Lebanon launching in 2017. 2018 also we launched in Bahrain with the Bahraini government, and that was the second phase, right? And I think the second phase ended with the new funds that we launched as well in the UAE, Saudi, and Jordan between 20. That was the COVID period between 2021 and 2022. We launched three different funds in Saudi, UAE, and in Jordan. And collectively now we have, I think, across all these funds, around $90 plus million of assets under management. As you said, we invested in more than 300 startups and worked with so many more startups, of course, like thousands of startups that went through the programs, and like started building this model that combines venture capital acumen plus accelerators and the programmatic approach to support startups, right? And
Got
that
it.
was the second phase.
So structurally, yeah, but the difference between the two phases in the accelerator in phase one, where you were just an accelerator with the program, you invested out of like the accelerator structure. You didn't have like a fund LPGP kind of structure. It was the accelerator taking equity in the companies with the cash that they put in, as well as the in-kind programmatic thing, right? And then the structural change was that you had like separate funds in phase two, and the accelerator just ran the program, but the funds were the ones that took the equity. Is that how?
Exactly. And also the follow-on funding component that I was telling you about was really important. The scale and the capacity to invest in that many startups wasn't there before. So actually these funds, because like the minimum fund size that we usually have is like $10 million or so. So that actually allowed us to invest in a large number of companies. So usually the number is somewhere 50 to 100 startups from a single fund. So the capacity to invest started increasing. One other thing structurally that we had internally that, and I think this was linked to the phase three, and we'll come to that later with the launch of F6 Ventures, that internally we started structuring the company as a VC team. There's an investment team that's responsible for the portfolio management, the investments, the transaction management, all of that. And then on the other side, the programs team. There's the accelerator team that runs the program and then they work with the companies during the accelerator period, and then they hand them over to the investment team. Like literally, that's how it was structured internally. And that was definitely the inspiration for us to start looking into the phase three of our expansion with the launch of the F6 Group and F6 Ventures.
So I mean, yeah, I mean that's a big announcement. F6 Ventures, very recent. You guys just set it up. I mean, tell me more about it. Yeah, man.
So one important, I guess, thing that I need to tell you as well that really contributed into this phase three, which is that I think we have realized that also accelerators is not one size fits all, right? So because like our accelerator model, like the core model of how Flat6Labs run has always been the same, right? So it's a cohort. So like for 4 months, starts with the application, ends with a demo day. With the startups through the program, you work with them on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, connect with the mentors, the training, all of that. You provide them with the capital and investment, of course. And that remains to be the same, and this is what we call the seed program. However, whereas there are so many needs and opportunities in the market for different formats of accelerator programs, where you might not need to provide capital, maybe you need to work with a corporate partner to develop a program around a certain sector, like in health, for example, or prop tech or fintech, or maybe it's not an accelerator program, maybe it's targeting much earlier stage. And in 2018, for example, we launched one of these major programs in partnership with the UK government called Start Egypt or Masr Tabda. And that program was an amazing opportunity to start thinking about how can we diversify our programs offering, right? Rather than just an accelerator, how can we build an environment that actually caters for the earlier stage, especially in the remote areas in Cairo or Egypt, sorry, and also provide support for sectors that maybe are underprivileged when it comes to access to capital. So, for example, health tech, social impact startups, green tech, agri tech, like they usually struggle a little bit more than their peers in other sectors, for example. And this is how Start Egypt was designed, like as a program, as an initiative to go across the country, promote entrepreneurship, promote, like teach and educate about entrepreneurship, about how you can start your startup, how to find the resources, all of that's not just about Flat6Labs, it's more about how to start as a startup or as an entrepreneur, right? And this is exactly how we started developing new concepts around like the programs. And then this kind of side of our business start taking a shape of its own, much, much bigger than just an accelerator. So now we have run, I think, close to like 60 or 70 different programs across the world in Egypt, of course, Saudi, UAE, Tunisia, Libya, Pakistan. Like we ran boot camps and programs in Cote d'Ivoire and Kenya and Senegal. Like it was just much more than the world of like the funds and the accelerators. And this is why we started thinking about okay, so now these are two very distinctive business lines, right? So we have the programs and we have the investments. They do overlap, of course, with the seed programs and how we work with the companies during the program. However, linking them to each other all the time, sometimes it hinders the growth of one side than the other, right? So the best way to do this from a structural point of view is actually to make sure that we have one group, and this is why we renamed our organization to be called F6 Group, that Dina, my partner, is the CEO of. And from the other side, we start expanding our programs offering to focus on the innovation, like building it as an entrepreneurship and innovation platform that works with corporates, donors, investors, everybody who would like to run a program independent of the investment side. And of course, the accelerator, this is also the accelerators are being run by the programs team. And of course, the Flat6Labs brand so much brand equity in the market and weight that we've decided, and people recognize it as an accelerator and as programs, so we've decided to keep it as Flat6Labs. And on the other side, to relaunch our venture capital and investment business with the brand F6 Ventures. And from everything that I think we have discussed over the last half an hour or so, it's not really new. It's not like we're starting a new business line, right? That we didn't do before. For the last 10 years or so, Flat6Labs and our group has been managing funds, managing portfolio, working with different limited partners. So it's not something that's totally alien or unique to our world. It's something that we're just doing it in a different structure to make sure that each business line grows in the proper direction on its own. So now we've launched F6 Ventures last month, and F6 Ventures basically is mandated, starting off, of course, with the portfolio that was under Flat6Labs. So the investment portfolio shifted to be under F6 Ventures now. And the second thing is like we're building like what looks, smells, and feels like a venture capital firm, right? That has, of course, it's born big because like we have presence in 5 different countries from day one, teams across these markets, and building on the success that Flat6Labs has achieved or F6 Group has achieved across these markets, but taking it further in 2 different directions. One, building venture capital funds that focus on pre-seed and seed stage, so that will remain to be our focus, of course, but also do more in terms of investments that are not directly linked to just an accelerator. So if we find a startup that we like, we don't need to join an accelerator. From our funds, we can invest directly in them, and you'll find us doing more and more of this. And from the other side, also start think about like how can we consolidate our operations, because like the Flat6Labs model, the inherited model from Flat6Labs, was mostly focused on very local markets. So there was Egypt, there was Tunisia, Jordan, Saudi, UAE. Going forward, and we have like announced this strategy a couple of years ago that we are consolidating our locations. So now there's an Africa strategy. So Egypt, Tunisia, with our expansion to sub-Saharan Africa, covering Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, and other markets, Morocco as well. All of that be under an Africa mandate. And then we're starting to also consolidate our Levant or Mashriq mandate between Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, and Iraq. So that's under and headquartered out of Amman. And then there's the GCC mandate that's between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi and the neighboring countries in Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. So that will be how we do it regionally. So we have 3 main regions that we're focused on: Africa, Levant, and GCC, if you'd say, for this stage. And so, from a geographic point of view, this will help us scale in these markets in a more consolidated way, but also streamline our operations in a fashion that actually serves our portfolio in the best way possible, and also the for the benefit of our limited partners and investors who invested in our funds.
Got it. And the fund is the one that if a startup is accepted in the accelerator run by the labs team, the fund is by default going to invest in
No,
that for the
no.
small. No.
So because labs run so many programs, right? So they run currently, I think, running like maybe just literally now like 12 different programs. We just announced a program very recently called Nawai, for example, in Palestine in partnership with Google. This program doesn't have an investment component, right? So it doesn't offer cash investment. It provides a lot of benefits and training and support and networking opportunities for Palestinian founders. However, it doesn't have an investment component. So what will happen is that these startups will go through the Nawai program, for example. And for us as F6 Ventures, if we find a startup that goes through this program that we like, they will go through the F6 Ventures process. They will present an investment committee, and if we like them, they will receive an investment. So this is how it will look like in the future. So this is like from the generic programs perspective. What we are also doing with the Africa Fund, for example, that there will be an Africa Seed program. It will be a Pan Africa program that will run once or twice a year, and this program will also cater for, like you would say, like the earlier stage founders that will still apply, go through this program. The program is run by Flat6Labs, but also is funded by F6 Ventures, and the portfolio is managed by F6 Ventures. So this is how we're keeping it a little bit separate in terms of the investment mandate versus the accelerator mandate. But like I would like you to imagine that now F6 Ventures is a venture capital firm on its own, investing a large number of companies in different geographies. But Flat6 also is an entrepreneurship platform that is running so many programs with different offerings. Overlap sometimes these programs, but each of these are very separate in terms of their mandates and how they invest.
Right. So some of these programs are run by the labs for the sake of the ventures organizations, but not
Right.
necessarily.
You
This will not
got it
always
very
be the
right.
case, of
Yes.
course. And in these cases, that's when you get equity in the accelerator, in the seed
It's not
program,
like from the
kind
seed
of
program we get equity in the startup directly as an
as
investor. So basically, we provide them with the capital and we get equity because
yeah.
we give them the capital to invest.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'm getting my head around the new setup because it's going to be about educating, of course.
You got it very right, I think. Yeah, and I think because like I guess going through the different phases, and I think like just explaining to you the history from 2011 up till 2025, different phases of growth that we went through. it makes a lot of sense, right? So because like we've started with this experiment out of flat number 6 in Giza, that's still there, by the way, flat number 6, and this is how the name came to be, Labs, to being this one of the biggest, like being one of the biggest entrepreneurship and investment platforms in emerging markets. Definitely took a lot of effort, time, money, and sweat from all of us to get to that point.
Yeah, and I mean, for the founders out there, they're not going to perceive this change as such. I mean, they're either be contacting the ventures team to get funding, or they'll be applying to the seed program, for example.
Exactly. So nothing much changes. The only thing that actually we're giving them an extra way of getting funded. So rather than just going through the accelerator program, they can approach the F6 Ventures team to receive an investment. So yes, exactly, you got it very right.
Right. So we could say that you guys have kind of decided to. At first, you were focused on the very earliest stage of startup investing, and now you're investing in two stages or two. You're more like
Yes, and I think that's also reflecting really the market progress and growth, right? If you look at the maybe the three major ecosystems in our region, so Saudi, Egypt, and UAE, you'll find that they have gone through so much transformation and growth over the last 15 years of operations, right? So and like they keep like shifting, like UAE maybe was like the most advanced. Now Saudi is a little bit more advanced in terms of number of startups and capital. But it remains to be that these will be the main three markets, and by from an economic perspective, but also from startups and entrepreneurship and venture capital deployment in general. And if you look at how these markets developed and the nature of like the founder mentality and the founder personality, if you would say, how everything, I think the time itself allowed that many of these founders now are repeat founders, repeat entrepreneurs, where they have founded a startup before, they might have exited or they went through a success story, but now they're coming back and would like to establish something new. Or what we say that success breeds success, meaning that many of the existing founders that could be a little bit more like advanced in terms of how they operate their startups, they might come from a long corporate background or experience, and then they started seeing that there are founders in the market that are actually going through this entrepreneurship experience and succeeding, right? So that inspired them to start, like, think about leaving their own very well paid corporate jobs or stable jobs and starting their own entrepreneurial journeys. So the nature of the founder now has changed a little bit. It's still, of course, the case. You still need the hands on support, you need the accelerator, they need the training, the mentoring, the connections. And I guarantee you that many of the success stories that we see or have seen with Flat6Labs over the years, they wouldn't have existed really without joining the accelerator program and providing them with that kind of environment and connections. But on the other end, you have the slightly more mature founders who have been through an accelerator before, who have been through the experience, who have the connections, who have raised a little bit of capital, and they really don't need to go through an accelerator program. So you still be able to cater for this kind of group of entrepreneurs. And so I don't know if they are really quite distinctive in terms of their stage business wise. I wouldn't say that this one is advanced than the other because, like, sometimes, and we have seen it, a startup could be making, like, I don't know, $1 million of ARR, for example, but they still need that support. They could still need more mentoring. They enter a new market where we can help them as F6 group enter a market like Saudi or Egypt or whatever, and they come to us for this and they say, I would like to join your program. I see the value in 1, 2, 3, and I want to join. And we have seen many cases of this. But from the other side as well, you find startups that stage wise or founders, they've just started. They still are pre-traction or early traction, but they are also very promising, and you still actually would like to bet on their product and the team and take a chance on them. So stage wise or traction wise, they might be like in the opposite direction, but you still actually support both, let's say, according to their needs.
So I mean, that sounds like exciting times for you and for the F6
I think it's an
Ventures team.
exciting time for our region at large, right? And especially also for the new region that we are expanding to, which is Africa. We're super excited about this market, and we can talk a little bit about it later. But like, it's a market that we really believe, especially with our like we're very unique with our presence in Egypt, where we are Middle East, but also we're Africa. And I feel Egypt very well positioned to be one of like, I mean, we just mentioned that Egypt is one of the three big markets in the Middle East, but Egypt also is one of the big four markets in Africa, right? So, and there's no one common player between these two groups but Egypt. So Egypt is actually a very well positioned player and market to cater for these two very, very promising regions.
Yeah, I agree. And basically, you've consolidated all the previous funds under F6 Ventures, right? And now you're raising a new fund, which will be in the 90 to $100 million range, as I understand it. Is it going to be like focused on, is it going, I mean, is this amount distributed evenly across the regions, or are you focused on certain regions?
We'll still have the regional split. So half of this will be for Africa, and it has its own team and its own fund. So that's the Africa Seed Fund under Ventures, and this will be a fund of like 50 to 60 million dollars that will be deployed in the African market. Africa, of course, covering North Africa, so that also means Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, but expanding in sub-Saharan Africa, so East and West Africa, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Eastern African countries, and West Africa meaning Nigeria, Ghana, and Francophone Western Africa. So that's the Africa Seed Fund, and I've started working on this fund, and we're getting ready to start deploying from this fund within the next few months and announce our first investment. From the other side, we are just about to come to the end of the existing funds in Levant and GCC. So we're currently running our like first, like last, I would say, round of investments from our Jordan or Mashroq Fund and our Saudi fund. So once, like within the next few months, we'll be announcing also the plans for this part of the region and as Middle East and happening, yeah, it's imminent. It's happening within the next few weeks slash months where we are announcing our plans for then. But like in terms of the total sum that you mentioned, basically our target, like the Dina and myself, I guess very like in a very optimistic way put on ourselves that we'd like to double our AUMs within the next 5 years, right? So within 15 years, we have 90 million. Within the next 5 years, as F6 Ventures would like to double our AUMs. So that will be between the Africa and the Middle East operations under F6 Ventures.
Got it. All right. So maybe we'll go into a bit of a personal segue. I mean, we spoke about the transformation of F6, of Flat6Labs to F6 Group and F6 Ventures and all that. And you've also kind of had quite a transformation personally in terms of your fitness and health and all these things. So, I mean, how did that come about, and how does it affect your work? If
It doesn't affect work at all. I have to fit my gym schedule now within the
no positive aspects.
No, I think again like it's a very personal thing, of course, but like it's also I guess I'm not sure if it's related to work or not, but like really the like if you look at it, where the very first 10 years of Flat6Labs, I really focused on Flat6Labs, and I think it was like really like it's a very demanding job. Like I think everything was just like covered the last hour in terms of like just starting in Egypt. It was literally just myself and an office admin for the first cohorts, for the first year almost of Flat6Labs. So like had to do so much, and then expanding all these countries and all of that. So definitely that was my top priority, right? So for the first 10 years, Flat6Labs was a big priority for me personally, and remains of course to be so as F6 Group. However, I think like starting with COVID, and I think like a lot of people like got this I don't know like epiphany or whatever during COVID. It's like okay, health is really important. Like we really need to start taking care of ourselves. It's careers are very important, jobs are very important, all of that. However, also like health is something that you cannot really substitute, right? So I guess starting COVID, start thinking about like okay, like how do I want to look like, and how do I want to like going up the stairs, or like traveling in a hilly city, for example, and like I was just talking about San Francisco, and like just going all up this, like how can you do it without running out of breath? And it was exactly like just what I had in mind in terms of like how do I want to look and act when I'm 40, and I just turned 40 this year actually. And yeah, it was more about like how I want to look like and how I want to behave when I like from a health perspective when I'm 40. And I started the journey, of course, and a few years ago. I'm quite, of course, very proud of this, if you'd call it a transformation or whatever. But for me, it's more about like not feeling better. Not looking better is good, I guess, but also feeling better, I think, is really important. and feeling the energy and like just, yeah, it definitely gives you a lot of confidence, but also like in terms of just going through your day and doing the many things we do on a daily basis. Like I was just literally telling Dina yesterday that I had to skip gym yesterday because I just came back from holiday, and I was just saying like now I lack the energy for the day because like just going to the gym and working out a little bit just gives you like now I think a few years later about like after training very religiously every day that now it gives you the energy literally for the day. So yeah,
Yeah. It's any best practices for people who want to do what you did? You're the second guest that's done this transformation, by the way. So
uh, there are no shortcuts. And by the way, like because people might think that I took a shortcut. I didn't take a shortcut. I didn't like there was surgeries or yeah, the Ozempics of the world and all that. I didn't do any of that. I just did it the very old-fashioned way of diet and fitness. And it does work, and a lot of people think that it doesn't work, but actually biologically, like it has to work because like calories in, calories out. If you burn more than what you eat, you will lose the weight. Like there's absolutely like, and I think in terms of the very specifics of how to get in shape or whatever, I think it's all about like knowing what you're eating and how much you're burning, but also, and I think you'll hear this so many times from people who have been through like a fitness journey, consistency is the key. Keep going. It goes ups and downs. You look at yourself in the mirror one day and you hate it. The following day you might like it a little bit, but keep going. Like consistency is everything. And again, reflecting back about the Flat6Labs story and where we are today, it's all about being consistent. Keep going. Like just being consistent is really the key word, and incremental, yes, because like if it's an 0.01 change every day, sorry, that accumulates to like maybe a 10% or a 20% change over a few months. So yeah, it's just all about consistency and keep going.
oh, very cool. I mean, lots of lessons for startups. Yeah, exactly. Just saying. So, I mean, going back to startups, you guys have graduated hundreds of startups and you've helped them raise follow on funding. What are the key pieces of advice you give founders when they're fundraising?
That's a very good point. I think founders. I think they always they always take, first of all, everybody always they always underestimate the effort that they need for fundraising. Like I haven't seen a single founder. Like so, there are some of
Yep.
course outliers and unique stories where like they don't know, like they find money like on trees or like being thrown at them for some reason. Definitely there could be outliers for that. However,
Hmm.
almost like 99% of the founders I have met, they have struggled with fundraising, took much longer than they anticipated. There's that one investor that promised them something and then it didn't happen or whatever. So the first piece
Hmm.
of advice, of course, it takes much longer and you need the stamina to keep going because like it's not usually as you expect. Time wise, effort wise, it's really like just you have to keep that in mind. It will take longer and you need to put a little bit more effort, I think, because like that's the status of an entrepreneur, that they have to run their business, but on the background they have to fundraise for it, right? So like they really sometimes they really don't think that it's a full-time job almost to be talking to investors and going through data rooms and pitching to investors and meeting with them at events or whatever, but it's almost a full-time job. So literally like
Yep.
in,
Yep.
in big companies that do fundraising, they have people who actually just do nothing but investor relations, and
That's
right,
their
their
job.
job to do
Yeah.
that. But for a startup, the founder or the CEO, they have to take care of it, right? So you have to allocate the proper time and effort to be able to actually do it properly. On the other
Yeah.
side, and I think this is one thing that a lot of the founders they really miss, that they don't, like we as investors, we do our due diligence on founders that we invest in, right? So from the commercial side, legal side, technical side, all of that. Many of the founders, they don't do due diligence about their investors. It's not just about due diligence as in the sense of knowing your investor. It's more about like what does your investor invest in? Like what kind of investor you should target, mapping the market. Like did this investor invest in a competitor? Like maybe you shouldn't approach them. You need to approach another investor, for example. Like also the international ones or the regional ones that maybe have like a regional mandate. So have you spoken to them? Have you approached them? So mapping the market, knowing your investors, knowing where they invest, that adds value. What kind of investor you need now? Do you just need the cash? Because there are many investors that are very happy to write you a check and maybe see you upon the exit. But sometimes you need more than just a check, right? So can they provide it? Do they have the capacity? Do they have the team? Do they have the network and the track record to prove that they can actually provide you with this kind of support that you need? So knowing what you need exactly and knowing your investor, I think, is really important. And unfortunately, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the founders, of course, and very understandably so, that they just focus on finding the money, but they oversee, like, okay, what comes with the money, and how can I get more value out of it, or whatever. So knowing your investor,
Yeah.
I think, is really important. So that's like before fundraising or managing the process. Managing the process externally and internally, I
Mm-hmm.
think, is really important. This is one other trap that a lot of founders usually sometimes fall in, that they think fundraising is an internal thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like a lot of, especially if you are having like kind of a small to medium team, they know you are fundraising, right? So you need to communicate to them about like the different scenarios, give them updates about who you are talking to, be transparent as much as you can, right,
Mm.
about your fundraising cycle, and would they lose their jobs if things take longer, for example. So you have to be transparent with your
Yeah.
team about like your runway, again, in terms that are logical, in terms of like what you can communicate to keep them
Exactly.
going, but also internal communication, because like you would rather be telling them yourself rather than them knowing it from the market or someone you know not knowing the right
Absolutely.
thing. So managing fundraising narrative internally is really important as well, right? And explaining,
I agree.
because like a lot of like when founders or the executive team of a startup that they communicate with, they are like a very small group, usually 2 3 people maximum, who communicate with investors, right? And then there's a huge army or a team behind them that usually don't interface with that investor, so they think of that investor just like the guy sitting in an office in a suit, and like they just like maybe they're evil or kind or whatever. So we'll just not get to that. But like they know what you're
Yeah.
dealing with, right? So you have to communicate, because that also kinda is directly linked to their livelihood and their jobs and all of that.
I agree. It's only fair, and it increases trust and loyalty at
A
the
hundred
same time.
percent. And transparency is important there
Uh,
as well. And that's all during the process.
yeah.
Once you have received that investment, it's all about how you manage the investment. Sorry, the communication with the investor,
Right.
which unfortunately, again, not a lot of founders do very well. Communicating with your investors in a timely fashion.
True.
Sometimes they just diminish it to a board. So like the set of the investors who sit on my board are the ones that I communicate with, and I think this is a big mistake.
Mm-hmm.
All the investors, they have
Yep.
right to the information for you to actually provide, because like they're just it's not a charity. They're giving you the money to find returns, and
Exactly.
these investors, they have their own investors, which are the LPs, who would like them to report on certain matters and explain to them how they will achieve the returns and all of this. So, so I think communicating with your investors is really, really important. I can't explain how much important, and being present and direct,
Yep.
being
Agree.
also open and communicating in a timely fashion with them, monthly, quarterly, however the frequency that they agree on or they choose to have. But it's very important that you have frequent communication with your investors, and be transparent, of course, as much as possible with them about all the different aspects, and also seek their support where they can provide it. And again, many of them overlook that.
Exactly. Use them.
Yeah, they just think of them as, again, it's a mere transaction. You give me the money. Hopefully, one day I'll return the money back with a little bit more, and that's it. But no, investors, they do care about their investment, and like you care about your startup. They're still shareholders in the company, and they would like to try to amplify or
Exactly.
like increase the value or the return of their investment as much as possible. So they are very keen to support you. They are on your side, and make sure to use them as much as you can.
All right. So, I mean, how do you guys make decisions in F6? Is it like majority based? Is it like unanimous? Is it the partner decides? How do you?
So the ultimate thing is always an investment committee. So actually, we do function as an institutional investor. We do have governance in place, and usually there are different bodies of governance. The investment committee or the IC is usually the ultimate body when it comes to investment decision making and the investment decision making as well. So when we exit, we have to present our exit opportunity or whatever the exit transaction to the IC as well. So at entry and at exit. So yes, the IC is, there are of course a lot of steps.
But is it majority based?
It depends. Sometimes there are majority based, sometimes it has to be a full consensus. And like the way I think I've seen this in practical terms, there everybody has to be on board. Because if there is one member on the IC who doesn't like it, they will find so many ways to convince the others that they have to change their vote or whatever. And I think like for you as a fund manager, you'll always feel like, like because like you just didn't put the IC because you just want to have IC, right? You actually want to get their input, right? So because these are people who come from like certain experience that maybe they will add a certain dimension of value to your investment decision making, all of that. So like their opinion is probably very valuable. So just for you to say like, okay, someone voted no and then I'm moving ahead with the transaction, like I don't think that would sit right with any fund manager. And then they will have to explore this further. And like usually sometimes it's not really a yes or a no, right? So there has to be, could be concerns. It could be like where usually the IC works that we present usually three things. We present an update on the previous investments, an update on the deal flow, on what we're maybe looking at for the next IC or the next meeting, and then the transactions at hand, like the transactions that we are presenting for that specific meeting, for example. So so you give them an idea about like the current portfolio, the market at large, and these specific transactions that you're looking at. And so in certain cases they could be like like no, this is not enough information for us. We have concerns about one, two, three. It's not a no, but like maybe we need to do legal intelligence to make sure that this kind of partner doesn't have that kind of exclusive right that might actually harm the investment in a certain way. That we need to make sure that, for example, that IP is actually vetted in a certain way. So might not be like a yes or no. It could be tabled for later. It could be like more information. And so that's when you're asking about like, is it a majority? Usually, if it's not a majority, it's because like there could be a valid concern that you as a fund manager would actually take seriously into consideration, and then you see it and then take it back to the IC.
And you and Dina Shanoufy have been like partners at work for a long time, and this is continuing with F6 Ventures. So, I mean, what makes for a great partner relationship, in your opinion, and how do you guys divide leadership responsibilities?
Absolutely. And like and I were more friends than just partners as well. I think this is like a very important. Like, if you don't get along with your partners, I think that's like a really bad sign. So like first of all, like we like and we do trust each other on a personal level a lot, and we have this kind of really like close relationship. And I think that's a very important aspect of it. We have worked with each other for a very long time, so we know what we like, we don't like. We do have our challenges in terms of like as any partners do in any way. However, I think we always know we have like the same vision in terms of what needs to be achieved. Like sometimes we might have different ways of how we get there, but we never disagree about the destination. Because if we have a disagreement about the destination, then we're not taking this train together. And I think like the thing that I've always had with Dina that we agree on the destination very early on, upfront, and then we decide about how we're getting there. We're taking the train, or we're going walking, or but and usually we think that we'll take the train, and then it ends up we are walking, but it's fine. And I think that's a very important thing. I don't use like cliche terms, but really trust is a very important aspect, and having this kind of transparency and openness with your partners. And I think this stands not only for venture partners, it also stands for any startup founder or any partnership in general from any side, right? Being that building the trust, gaining the trust. The trust is not really something that is just inherited by default. It's something that you build, you work on, and it takes time, and it just happens overnight. And we have seen many cases where like partners fight, and like they get into even legal fights sometimes, because like they really haven't they don't know each other very well, and like they don't have this kind of trust bridge between each others, for example. So I think trust, without again sounding very cliche, is really really. And we're very different again, like our backgrounds are different as well. So I come from an engineering, a technical background. Dina comes from an investment and private equity background, so we do complement each other in many ways and how we operate. Even when I was the quote unquote the CEO of Flat6Labs, Dina was also the co-CEO, because like as I explained the model of how Flat6Labs was operating. Yes, there are programs, and I've been the one building the programs and the pros from scratch, but like the last 10 years, this was all about investments. So the investment side, yes, Dina had as being the chief investment officer, but she was practically co-running the company with me, or I co-run the company with her. And I think it was that kind of dynamic we built really early on as well. But we complement each other in many ways, and we're very different, but we complement each other in many ways for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, all very important elements like having very clear alignment on the destination and the goal, having trust, and also not being exactly the same kind of people. I mean, just complementing each other is much more powerful than having the same skill set. Cool. So these, I mean, last couple of years, especially now, it's starting to break through, luckily. But I mean, have been challenging in terms of liquidity and exits and all that. And that's, of course, globally affected LP investments in venture. They've slowed down, etc. Have you seen the same trends and conservatism in the regional ecosystem, or is it different?
I guess yeah, we have our own set problems and challenges as well. So you have the global challenges, and then you have the local ones, and we have the regional dynamics as well, which are very important since we're a regional player and we operate in markets. So like Egypt, for example, as an economy, had its own challenges with the valuation over the last few years, and how we can how to handle all of this. I think we were lucky in a sense where the development really happened twice within the lifetime of our previous fund in Egypt, at the beginning and at the end. So within the lifetime, it was kind of stable. So that we're lucky in that way, and also we're lucky that many of the startups that received funding or follow-on funding, of course, in our portfolio, they received it from international investors, usually in international, on international terms, so in foreign currency. So kind of that hedged the investment, I would say, a little bit, and the valuations and all of that. So yes, the market conditions are difficult at large in terms over the last few years. Fundraising is also difficult. I think there was a huge kind of growth, or just it was really going up very steadily and fast during COVID, and then just the pandemic things start slowing down. And I guess you have the local economic factors that we talked about, and then you have the external ones. You have the wars around us. So all of that, of course, comes to play, and it does impact how we operate. Go back to what we were saying, because Flat6Labs has seen, I don't know how many revolutions and protests and wars and regime changes that I've been through, but I've seen so much very early on. I remember the first few weeks of launching Flat6Labs in 2011. There were barricades and block the streets were blocked, we're because our office is in Giza, right next to Cairo University. So we have seen it. I've seen the worst of it, and this is what I always try to tell people, because if you started in such an environment, everything else is just like a spring for you.
Piece of cake, yeah.
Yeah, not piece of cake. Of course, we go through the challenge with everyone else, but again, you have been there were days where we literally couldn't get to the office because the streets were blocked, right? So we have, and again, this is not where we don't work within a single sector. We work, yes, it's venture capital, of course, but it cuts across everything. It cuts across in the economic layer, the ability capital, and banking, finance, health, education, because you have startups with a diverse portfolio across all these sectors. So if there's one sector that's a little bit behind or advanced, it will definitely impact your portfolio in such a way. But again, going back to what I was saying that from very early on with Flat6Labs, and again, I don't know if it's luck, but also I guess big part of it is our strategy to expand beyond one single market, right? So having the presence in Saudi, in the UAE, and Jordan, and Tunisia, and now in Africa, we are not as highly impacted by one certain. Of course, Egypt is a very important market, and half of our team is based in Cairo. However, we still have a large operation as F6 Group across all these markets, right? And I think this is also a very key important aspect in terms of how you manage the risk of the geography and the currency and all of that. And from the other side, as I said, like the startups, although they operate many of them they operate in local markets, many of them they seek investments from other like markets, and many of them they actually move to other markets. I've seen many startups, for example, move into the Saudi market or other markets to explore opportunities, which I think is also a big part of like the tenacity that you need with like this kind of entrepreneurial adventure. Just keep going and being alive and keeping alive, I think, is really important.
Yeah, staying alive. And what about the exit options for startups? How do you see that progressing across the region?
So startups don't exit. That's the thing. So investors do exit. Startups, they if they are exiting, that means the founders are selling their stake in the company and they're not in the company anymore, right? So it's the founders who are either like exiting, but the business is being acquired by someone else, for example, or the investors are selling their shares in the business to someone else. And I think that the latter one, I think, is quite key in terms of how we look at the exit case, right? And I think many of people like, they think that of exits as a singular way of a startup getting acquired by someone else, but like this is not necessarily the only way to exit because like there is something called secondary markets where or secondary exits in general where for me as an investor I could sell my equity to someone else at a later stage and then make returns on my investment. And for us as a seed and pre-seed investor, we are more likely to have this happening at maybe Series A or Series B than a later stage investor that would be investing in Series A. Like it's very unlikely that a Series A investor, for example, exit at Series B, which is the following round, right? You have to stay at least one round. And again, that's one of the maybe the myth in the market that all we always try to like explain that seed investments are a little bit more risky than later stage investments. I don't see it really that way because like if you think about it, most of Series A investment investors, we have seen cases for exits that they had to exit through an IPO or through an acquisition, a full acquisition for the business from someone else. And these two things remain very limited in our market, or they have to exit secondary at maybe Series C or to a private equity player. Again, in terms of market purity, hasn't really, we're not that far yet. So seed and pre-seed in emerging markets were very likely to exit, and have seen it many times, and we have had several exits like that where we decide to exit just prior to the Series B or at the Series B stage. We have several startups now in our portfolio that are ripe enough for us to actually start working on exiting without getting acquired because like now they need to start clearing the cap table, clearing the governance as well. So sometimes we have say a board seat and like to clear that, so we'd like to exit the investment and someone else comes and maybe they need that kind of new investor that will add different value at this stage, for example. So they would come in at this later stage and they would acquire our stake rather than acquiring the whole company. And that's a very likely scenario for seed and seed stage investors because like for us as a seed investor, wait till a company gets acquired, and usually that happens from maybe year 5 to 7 up to 10. That means that we are holding the investment for a very long period of time. IPO is out of the question for us. Like it doesn't really make technical sense for us to stay in a company till the IPO, and like, very limited in terms of actually IPO opportunities in the market anyway. But again, for us to exit pre-series B is more likely to happen, and exiting secondary is also more likely to happen. And acquisition, of course, and mergers do happen as well, and I've seen several of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think secondary is, of course, very viable exit option for investors who are early stage. And acquisitions have been increasing more and more recently in the region. Regional players like acquiring each other, things like that, as well as global players entering the region. But actually, I would say that IPOs are actually heating up in Saudi, in UAE. We're seeing more IPOs and people thinking of, even people who started in Egypt strategically thinking of IPOing outside of Egypt. So
And again, but I totally understand and I totally support that statement. But I also wonder, for example, I don't know, like I would love to go back to the like maybe the IPO or the prospectus of Jahez, for example, in Saudi when they had the filing. I don't know how the cap table looked like and how many of these investors were first day investors, right? Because like if you are in, I don't know, like Jahez. has been or had been around for how many years before the IPO. But like, if you're a seed investor, like first like day investor, and you remain to be in the company till the IPO, that means you have waited out on your investment for a very long time, right? So I think it all depends on like the stage where you're investing, or like the timing of your investment vis-a-vis the IPO and when it's happening. I'm hoping to see more liquidity in the market is something that we all wholeheartedly support. And because like we have seen it with Jahez, we have seen it with in other markets, like maybe with Jumia and others, like when they had their IPO, with Swivel at their like IPO as well. It brings the, and yeah, it does kind of like creates this kind of mobility in the market that of course we need. And like just yani, I don't know, I know that you have Karim Jouini of Expensia in Tunisia, and you can't believe how much the impact that actually Expensia created in the local market in Tunisia. Because like first of all, it's an inspiring story. To Karim himself and many like his co-founders, now they are investing in startups as well. The investors who invested in now they are investing in more startups. Same is the case for InstaDeep, which is the same market of Tunisia. So the founders of InstaDeep, they invested I don't know in how many now in our own portfolio in Tunisia and many other startups. So this is what we need, because like I'm hoping that they bought like some beach houses, or like they they made some good use of the money. But like it's always very inspiring to see these founders believing in what they know the best, which is supporting tech innovations in these markets, investing again in their country. And again, it's such an inspiring thing to see what's happening in Tunisia. But it remains to be a small ecosystem, of course, and but again, so many bright minds. And since we have been in that market for 7 years, so I can tell you a little bit more about Tunisia. But like again, just seeing Expensia and InstaZeep and the impact from just two, although actually like the companies like Expensia was both InstaDeep and Expensia were focused more in the European market, of course, than the Tunisian market. But like their impact and the talent they created in the market and the founders investing back in the market is so and we'd love to see more. And I'm sure we'll see it many more cases now and in the future in other we see it now definitely in Saudi, we see it in Egypt. Many of the founders who have had exits investing again.
Exactly. I mean, and it's like it's the natural progression of ecosystems. And as you said, I mean, look at Saudi now versus when you entered the market in 2013. It's totally different, and the exits that are happening are creating this positive feedback. Yeah, the whole country is different, of course. Yes. So yeah. So going back to founders and you as an investor, I mean, what's your favorite question to ask founders?
Oh wow, there's so many of them. I don't like. We try not to be as intimidating as people actually think that we could be, because like we speak to like especially that with the Flat6Labs programs experience we have interviewed, and I personally interviewed like maybe I want to say thousands, but maybe thousands of entrepreneurs. And at some point, you just know all about the team. And going back to the point we mentioned before, so like one of the questions usually I like to ask is two questions, like how did you get to know each other as a team, like your background together as a team, not as individual, like not your own experience, your educational background, but actually how did you meet and where and when and how long have you known each other, and like how do you deal with arguments and yeah. And the second one is like, why are you doing this? Like, it sounds like a very simple question, but like, why? Like, literally, why? Like, could have been doing anything else. Like, why are you doing this specific thing now? I'm sure there's a reason, right? And usually, like, they think about it as like, I'm trying to ask them about the problem they are solving, but it's not really about that. It's more about like trying to find the passion of why they are excited about doing a very specific thing right now. And it could be a personal experience that they have been through. It could be like something that they see the value that they come from, like a work experience, like a problem that they have identified and tried to solve, or they just like identify this as a pattern, like startups within like as a market within that specific domain that they actually have more success rates. So it could be very scientific in terms of how they are approaching why they are doing what they are doing. But I also like to do this. And again, and I guess it's not a cheap question, but like usually it's like, how far are you taking this thing? Like what's your plan? Like, is it just about, getting the product in the market, or getting to like, I don't know, an X amount of ARR a year, or it's about exiting and creating a success story first. Like what, like what's the end goal here, right? And just like have like these specific questions, and I think more about like the team itself, too, about their passion and their motivation about what they're doing and the end goal or destination. I think for an investor to know, first of all, to know these things and be aligned and actually make sure that they are within their norm of like values and things that they are looking for, I think is really important. So also it sets for you like how you can support them and how can you take them to the next stage, and just knowing the team more in general.
Cool. And on the subject of questions, what's the best question an LP has asked you?
Oh my god. You just bring up like very like cold sweats and nightmares now. I was like, the LP was like so funny because like when we talk about founders all the time, like VCs, as if like they are like like the like that side of the entrepreneurship story with a founder, but also the many founders, they don't know that investors themselves, they have to go and fundraise and beg for money like they do. Uh, oh, there are so many things actually. I'm trying to remember, but like we have been put through a lot of challenges with different LPs, right, over the years in terms of, because like again you come from, I don't know if you have recognized it, Ali, but like there isn't one single Egyptian operator or an investor that has gone as far as Flat6Labs, as deep as in these markets. Of course, we have like regional investors as private equity or as like in the financial sector who have expanded, who have great success stories like EFG and CIB and many others who invest regionally and internationally. But like when it comes to startups and entrepreneurship, like nobody has done like as Flat6Labs when it comes to local deep integration in markets. And usually this is a question when we go to a new market. Why are you coming? Like what kind of value would like to add here in Tunisia or in Bahrain or in Kenya, or like your market very well. And so why did you decide to get on a plane and come here? And how are you doing it and why you're doing it? And it's a very common question, of course, we get when we look at new markets and the value we're trying to create. And of course, the answer sometimes changes over the years because, like at the beginning, you didn't have much track record, and then it's more about like we believe in your market, we believe in what we can do here, one, two, three, all of that. But then you start building all like pockets of value here and there, and then you start connecting it together. So usually, this is like a very important question, and it's a valid one. That yeah, why are you launching or investing in this specific market? Why do you want my money for this market? And so far, previously, most of our fundraising happened locally. So we had to go. We all our investors in Tunisia, minus two investors, are from Tunisia. So we had to go and raise money from local family offices, one of the largest banks, one of the largest SME funds, and get them to invest with you as a foreign fund manager in Tunisia. So you have to sell the value of why you are not a Tunisian fund manager, you are an Egyptian fund manager coming, building this fund and hiring local talent and all of that. But I don't know, like I don't know. I'm trying to think of like one very specific difficult question, but I can't. Like usually, fundraising is all very difficult. I'm just
It's an important question, the why question.
but it's usually the why, I guess, that you have to like answer very well, because otherwise you're just not very serious about like what you're doing in that country, or you don't know it very well. Yeah.
So, I mean, you guys, you've seen a lot of regional deal flow. I mean, in addition to the companies you've invested in, what do you see as the up and coming verticals or that are really have a lot of traction these days?
You want me to say AI, or you want a different answer?
Well, everybody says AI, of course, but I mean, what in AI? I mean, AI is such a broad thing.
Exactly. I guess yeah, 100%. I guess like you said the right thing, because AI for me is not it's not a sector. It's actually it's a technology, and it's like saying I only invest in like I don't know HTML because like now it's like as basic as like a technology like tool that of course there's of course generative AI as a sector, it's a sector of its own. But like, how much generative AI you think we can have in our region, especially in emerging markets, right? Of course there are, and there are some big examples, but they always be very limited, right? But like AI integration at large, I haven't seen a single startup over the last year in any of our portfolio companies that hasn't integrated AI in a certain way, right? Sometimes they put AI in their tagline just to make it sexy enough for investors, which I guess I don't know, like AI powered or AI enabled, whatever, powered startup, like the same concept. So yeah, I guess I guess, but being serious, I don't think really, if there is like we all now, I guess, use ChatGPT and all the other AI models on a daily basis, and we kind of like cannot imagine how our lives looked like before we use them. And we always get surprised. We always get like very inspired when you look at them, and like you just think about it from just using it on a daily basis to do your work or whatever, help you with personal things. But at the same time, there are so many great things you can create from like just the software side. And like I guess this is like where the transformation is really happening as well, in terms of the technology, building applications, how fast it, like I guess as investors, and we were just talking about like product market, being product market fit or the product validation in general, how fast AI can help you achieve this, right? How can help you achieve success or failure. And I think this is really key in terms of the shortening the cycle, the entrepreneur cycle in general, and meeting or like identifying if this is like the right product for the market right now, or like no, it's still too early. I think AI can really help achieve that.
But are there like high potential sectors that you see?
You know, one of the things that fintech is usually like one of the top sectors, of course, that comes out in all the reports, and you see most of the funding and all of that. Funnily enough, for us as a seed investor and historically as Flat6Labs, we haven't really done a lot of fintechs for several reasons. One, as a seed investor, there is always like a limitation on how much capital you can invest, and usually fintechs you need a larger sum of money than their other sectors, because like they could go going through a regulatory kind of approval cycle that needs more time or resources in general, or like just building the product has to meet certain expectations. You can't really just launch a fintech within a few weeks. You have to do everything properly. So like the development cycle of a fintech, sometimes it doesn't really match how we operate as with the program and the investments that we used to make. We do have really good fintechs in our portfolio, of course, and we're very proud of them, but not that many. It's not the top sector, for example. So that said, we're really excited about sectors like health tech, education, agri-tech specifically. As we're expanding in Africa, I've seen amazing agri-tech innovations, and I feel like this is a space that can really be disrupted in Egypt, especially we are an agri country at the end of the day. It's one of the first in history, and it has its own challenges, like many other sectors in Egypt, like education and health. However, it could be really disruptive if we start integrating technology at a larger scale in agriculture in our markets. We are also very excited and about like SaaS in general. I know sometimes SaaS or tech products that are just pure tech products, people think of them and in the region as it takes like more of like a longer cycle to get to the product market fit and get to the MRR or the ARR that you're trying to achieve. However, we do like we like investing in SaaS in general. We, in terms of scalability as well, and how like the amount of effort and money and resources you need to scale your product from 10 users or 100 users to like tens of thousands is not really as much as fintech, for example, because like if you have 1,000 customers with a fintech, probably you need to scale your resources in a certain way to provide the support and the technology that you would need for many more users, capital as well. So these are sectors that we are really excited about. We have started also with the Africa Fund, focusing for the first time on a new sector that we believe can also help a lot, which is climate. There, regardless of like the urgency of addressing the climate, like resilience matters in general, we believe that there's so much more capital now, especially injected by developmental agencies in emerging markets that is addressing opportunities for climate. And there's a very limited pipeline. And for us as a pre-seed and seed investor in F6 Ventures, but also Flat6Labs as an entrepreneurship platform, we believe that we can play a major role when it comes to addressing opportunities within the climate space. And we have several actually programs and initiatives in the works that are focused on climate that will be announced within the next few months. So it's also a sector that we are very excited about. So yeah, I think these are some.
Yeah, quite a few sectors. And if like if you could have a magic wand and you could wave it regardless of like the realm of possibility and change one thing about the regional ecosystem, what would you change?
The one thing actually, this is one thing I learned from Ahmed Alfi specifically, what like the way how he describes an ecosystem. What's an ecosystem? An ecosystem is a system that exists on its own without external factors. Like it can grow, can exist without external stimulation, right? Or support for that matter. So it has to exist on its own. So far, most of our entrepreneurship ecosystems in our region, they are not an ecosystem because cannot exist on their own without the involvement of governments injecting specific amount of capital, and governments of course they play a major role. And Silicon Valley, which is I guess the role model for entrepreneurship ecosystems, did have a lot of government support at the beginning. But like as an ecosystem, we're not there yet in terms of having the full cycle of education. And mentioning Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, like, how many universities are there? Like, I'm sure it's highly linked to the educational side of the ecosystem, right? So how many of our ecosystems are actually linked to our educational systems? That's still a missing piece. The capital availability is quite limited, although I know and everybody thinks that there's millions of dollars being injected by governments and sovereign wealth funds and DFIs, but actually in terms of what the capital that the region deserves and the opportunities that are out there in the market is so immense and so much bigger than the capital availability. So we need much more capital across all the stages. I know that I might be more inclined to say, yeah, pre-seed and seed lacks a lot of capital and we need more capital there, but believe me, capital scarcity is there across the board from pre-seed up to Series C and D. I would love to see more involvement from corporates. And we talk about exits. Exits can be done and healthier if bigger organizations that have the liquidity and they have the presence and they have the innovation needs start getting more involved in the entrepreneurship ecosystem by either acquiring or investing in startup companies. Unfortunately, most of the corporates we have in our region, they do have innovation strategies, but the innovation strategies are dictated by the headquarters in Europe or like in Asia or somewhere else. So, and then it's just being reflected here rather than building local or regional corporate innovation strategy that actually links it to the local ecosystem. And most of the innovation, if you think about it, most of the tech products that many of these corporates utilize, they are developed outside of our region, right? You'll find them, they have their tech offices, mostly not in our region. So by definition, their tech innovation doesn't happen in the region. So they don't identify some of these opportunities as a tech innovation that I can actually acquire or invest in, right? So having these big conglomerates and corporates being more involved in terms of injecting the liquidity, either as investment or as acquisitions in our market, I think is really important. The other side,
So if yeah, I mean, if you out of all these things, if you have one thing that you want, that's the magic one thing. That's the yeah, the Joker card. What would you choose?
yeah, I'm too realistic to think that there's a magic wand in the world, but it's and again, I'm just too systematic and realistic that I think like, well, it has 1 to 3. You don't have to do 1 to 3. You can just do one thing. It's just more. It's literally more capital because like we believe more capital, more success stories. Success breeds success. I mentioned that before. This will inspire many more startups, many more founders or yet to be founders to start, which we need. So, and it's something, it's so funny. 14 years later, doing this job. This is the thing. Like, what's lacking? Like, what's the biggest challenge? You keep saying the lack of capital, although it's not better. Like, we in 2011 from Abu Dhabi to Casablanca was like maybe less than, I don't know, like, $10 million. Today it's in billions. But would love to see more. And I believe that our region deserves so much more. And if the magic wand is there, it would definitely create the liquidity and the capital that the ecosystem requires. Because I believe there's so much talent in the market, and the supply of talent is so much more than the capital available. And once we start actually balancing the talent with the capital, I think it will really change like the whole face of the region. That's a good question. So as I told you, like first of all, like we do have this mission to double our AUMs. We're not starting with the small amounts. We have $90 million of assets across our funds that we kind of moved under F6 Ventures from the group. I would love to double that. We are super excited about the Africa expansion. So seeing more presence. We haven't made investments yet in Sub-Saharan Africa. So hoping within 5 years we'll have many portfolio companies in Eastern West Africa that we have worked with. We believe that Africa is quite disconnected when it comes to North and Sub-Saharan Africa. So we're hoping that we can bridge, and we have all the right ingredients and the resources to do that as F6 Ventures and F6 Group. So building this kind of connection between North and Sub-Saharan Africa is a very important mission for us. Helping startups from Egypt expand to these markets and vice versa, and from Morocco to Kenya and from Tunis to Senegal is something that we would love to see, and we're very keen to keep doing. And more funds, more startups. Hopefully, we get to like, I don't know, like we're 300 portfolio companies now. So within 5 years, maybe we'll approach like 400, 500 startups in the portfolio. But that's our mission.
Cool. So maybe I'll go into the quickfire questions now. What book do you like to recommend to others, or books?
Like we started, it's I don't know, it's like a personal thing because like it has the story of why I joined Flat6Labs, how I joined Flat6Labs, Startup Rising by Chris Schroeder. He wrote this book, and it's so funny because I don't know if he will be revisiting like some of the stories he had in the book, because like he captured a very important moment in the region between 2011 and 2012. Everything was just starting, and Chris is a great friend and mentor, and he has like a very interesting way of like writing. He has also a very amazing newsletter, and he released a lot of articles, and I hope that he actually revisits like the book 15 years later to see how things have developed. But there's somewhere in one chapter in that book it tells the story of how I joined Flat6Labs and met Haney because I tweeted something. So it's a personal thing. But yeah, I feel like if you want to know about the history of the ecosystem, go and read Startup Rising.
All right. So how do you unwind and how do you stay energized? I have a feeling I know the answer to this one, but
And it's so funny because like again, I think I personally am very privileged in the sense that I got to work with so many people from different backgrounds, but also from different cultures and different nationalities. Because of Flat6Labs and the F6 group history, I've built amazing connections and friendships with people from Abu Dhabi to Bahrain to Tunis to Amman and Beirut and Nairobi now and Lagos. And this is something that, it's so like unique in terms of the nature of our job as investing and also working with these people, because like we really connect on like there's like the business and the investments and all of that, but like building this connection with people is really energizing, and this is what keeps us going every day, because like you keep growing, you keep meeting new people, even as far as like going to Dakar, for example, and meeting that amazing founder who's building something so unique for their own local community. And then this really inspires you, right? It gives you a lot of energy and feeling that you're actually leaving impact beyond your limitations. Because like yes, I'm limited with my own geography or being here or there, but at the end of the day, still with a little bit of capital and you can give and provide the value to entrepreneurs, as far as like as I said, Dakar and Casablanca and Nairobi. That's literally. not just the gym. So that keeps us that gets a lot of energy every day for sure.
Cool. So who do you think we should have as a guest on the podcast?
I don't know if you had Hani or Alfie, but I'm sure it would be lovely to have. Would love to. I'm more than happy to make the introduction, of course, and have either of them. And we have so many great partners and founders, and Dina, of course, also would be a great, I think, conversation to have. So yeah, I don't know, like if I have a specific person in mind, but I think you're already on the right track anyway. My colleague, I don't want to be like just my colleagues, but like
But I like them. What can I say?
what can I say?
So, I mean, I like to close the episode always on a note of gratitude. So, what is a gift someone has given you that has had a positive effect on your life?
I always get like gadgets, like tech gadgets. I don't know why. I remember like in the first year or two, Alfie like he gifted me an iPad. Like I don't know, like I think like the first 2 3 cycles it was a big thing. And like and like gave it to me the iPad. Like I think like just the gesture itself was much more valuable than the iPad itself. I don't know where the iPad. I think the iPad is sitting broken somewhere here in my house. It was such like a nice gesture. I think it was very personal as well, and because I take a lot of notes, like also Dina, like she got me like the ink, the tablet for like the promoting the brand, but like yeah. So also because like it was a personal thing that because like it kind of replaced all my note taking to be more digitized. But that was also like because it's a very recent thing. Yeah, it's always take gadgets with me. So
Cool. Yeah. So, on that note of gratitude, also, I'd like to thank you for your time and for sharing the story of Flat6Labs. It's been a part of the story of the region in terms of startups and the startup ecosystem, definitely. And cool to have you on. Thank you for
thank
your
you so much,
time on
Ali.
this.
I really enjoyed this. I hope people will find it useful in the many things that we discussed, حتى if it's just small bits. But thank you so much for having me. And looking forward to like your next episodes and like following the podcast and the many guests you'll have on.
Thank you. It's a
Thank you so
pleasure.
much, Ali.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Startups Arabia podcast. If there was something you really liked about what the guest said today, reach out to them on social media and tell them what you liked. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? You don't want to miss any of our great upcoming episodes. Also, please rate us and give us comments on our social media accounts so that we know how to improve. And also tell us what you like. We don't mind hearing that either. Until next time, this was your host, Ali's Whale.